Oh, we had this headline in the middle of the day yesterday. Former state senator Jeremy Hutchinson pleads guilty to bribery charge in the Western District Court of Missouri. Essentially, he said, yeah, I took bribes from the Missouri nonprofit using taxpayer dollars. It is preferred family health care, something that you guys have heard a lot about if you've been following this story. Prosecutors agreeing to dismiss the remaining charges when he is sentenced. We'll see what happens. The Gazette noting that, quote, the veteran lawmaker hails from a powerful family that has produced a former U.S. senator and the state's current governor, and he now faces up to 13 years in federal prison. Joining us now to talk about this, we've got another former state senator on the line. Senator Bryan King is with us. Hey, Bryan, how's it going this morning?
It's going good. Good morning, Paul.
Yeah, good morning to you. What's your reaction to all of this? I mean, I know you served with Jeremy, and you guys didn't see eye to eye on hardly anything.
Well, Paul, when it came, I don't know if you spoke about the orthodontist and the $150,000 bribe that he pled guilty to, and then he pushed the legislation through, and then he got other people to run the legislation for him. When it came time for that bill, there was two people in the Senate that didn't vote on it, and one was Jeremy Hutchinson, and the other one was me. But I guess in reacting to it, the sad part about it is no one's, not surprised. This has been going on for several years up there, been carried out. And there's times that I look back now and think, maybe I should have saw this or that, and you didn't see it. Then you start seeing something and you start wondering, and then there's a point there you start going, there is something going on here, and you start questioning it, and then, that's when the floodgates open on you. And, that's what happened to me. That's what happened to Linda up there. And, then you're ostracized. You're called crazy. You're called mean. You're called a bully for trying to do this. And so, the really thing is, it's really just not surprising with him.
Mm-hmm.
You go back and look at his legislation that he ran consistently. You can see a lot more things now. And, you just wonder how much more money did he take?
Yeah, I wonder, for example, he passed just a resolution one time. It was just a resolution recognizing Tom and Bontia Goss, the heads of Preferred Family Healthcare, who are in a lot of trouble for using all this taxpayer dollars to enrich themselves and bribe politicians to keep the Medicaid dollars coming to them. Did people know then what was going on? I think they did. I think they suspected, he's passing this resolution honoring the heads of this Medicaid giant company, and he's probably, making $9,000 a month. They might not have known he was making that much from them, but, everybody knew what was going on, it seems like. Bryan? Oh, did we lose Bryan? Bryan, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, are you back with me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead, respond to that. Did you hear what I said?
Yeah, I did. And it just seemed like over a period of time because, you're busy handling other legislation. You're busy doing other things. You're not busy focused on things. And it just didn't seem. But, when things really started to open up, it's just like when Gilbert Baker started getting exposed. And to me, when the bubble really burst was when, you had the Faith and Freedom deal and Michael Lamoureux getting $120,000. That's when it really burst for me. There was always these things going on. You hear things and you wonder, but you just really didn't know for sure, and you really couldn't say anything. But, and you look back at, and, we've talked about it multiple times, which, look at the media. They never talk about this part. They never look into this. Look at the Medicaid disclosure bills. That just tells you everything you need to know about what's going on. And, they played games with it. Jeremy was the biggest one of the biggest that fought it. He had his helpers in trying to defeat it to cover up his own actions. And they're the ones in power. And, certainly, the governor, his uncle didn't do anything. Jim Hendren protected Jeremy Hutchinson. They all protected him up there. Now, here's the question. Why? I mean, why were you so afraid of and you get you would get the answers of like, well, this would do this. I mean, remember, it's like, Jeremy, give the feds credit for putting this together and getting it done. But, now the question is that the media down there will not ask. I mean, they literally let it get away. They're culprits in this and help, cover it up. I can remember, Linda fighting Jeremy and Senate Judiciary in 17, me, and then the media the next day would be like writing something totally different than what actually happened. I mean, it was so pathetic. It was almost like this is North Korean news page.
You mentioned the question that everybody should be asking now. What do you think that is?
No, I think it is. Well, why did you do? Why didn't something happen? I mean, how was, once 17 came around the session, there was enough clear suspicion about what was going on. Just suspicion. With Jeremy and the legislation he was running, it was clear as a bell. How is he able to talk, like on the Dorothy Donisville, how is he able to talk two people, Lance Eads and Michelle Gray, into running the legislation for him? I mean, why was Jeremy Hutchinson able to pass major legislation? I mean, people ask me, was Jeremy, where was he at? I would put Jeremy one of the top 5 people in the Senate, clearly, that was able to pass legislation, work on major legislation. And, he runs a bill that involves behavioral health and Senate Judiciary. I start questioning him over it. And he didn't like it, okay? And he was evasive in his answers, wouldn't give straight answers, like he did. And clearly he didn't want to talk about it. And you know what? Guess what? It all still passes. I mean, there should have been something whenever in 17 to say, he doesn't need to be passing this.
So
he doesn't need.
I was asking this question at last hour. It's a hypothetical, but if he hadn't been indicted, he wouldn't have resigned. And if he hadn't resigned, he would have served this last session. And I think everybody's still knowing everything, the suspicions and all of the investigations and everything. I think, like you said, he still would have been able to work on and pass major legislation, and the stuff he wanted to get through would have gotten through, right?
Yeah, there's no question about it. And, it's one thing about the corruption part, but it's the other thing when you look at his legislation. I mean, you look at the whole, we've talked about, I continue to talk about the crime crisis that we have going on. Look at Little Rock. Look at even in rural communities of people that continually steal and don't get sentenced to crimes, don't accept rehabilitation or responsibility, and nowhere to put them. I mean, it's just consistently, a crime crisis going on out there. And Jeremy was the one that everybody turned to up there, that depended on to be able to solve it. I mean, but I'd like to talk about Paul about time to turn the page on Jeremy and move on and start asking other questions. I mean, once again, look at the Medicaid disclosure bills. I mean, look at who all fought it. Look at Jeff Wardlaw, who now we have found out not only did he have something to hide, he was in major business dealings with David Norsworthy.
Yeah.
That had to deal with Medicaid. Mm-hmm. What has happened to him?
Well, and here's the thing on that. Here's the thing on Jeff Wardlaw. So, that came out at the very beginning of the session. It was a big story. I went back and pulled a video of him, talking against this Medicaid disclosure bill. And if you go listen to his arguments now, knowing what we knew about him potentially being exposed and having to report all that business, it was a very condemning video, and nothing happened. And what I mean by that is the session went on as if everything is fine, and from what I could tell, there was no lack of trust, and every, State Representative Wardlaw was was continued to be given the benefit of the doubt. And I just found that odd. But, I mean, it just kind of goes to show that and unless the feds get involved and you actually get arrested for something, then there's really no consequences.
No, there's not going to be anything. There's no one down there outside of a couple of people that have the courage. There's certainly no one in the Senate willing to step up and question. I mean, look at the part about the loans, or these loans, or, they call them loans. Jeremy Gillum. What happens to Jeremy Gillum? You know what? He gets a big, cushy $100-something thousand a year job, which is a total waste of taxpayer money. I mean, it is just continually, card after card gets, falling this. Like when we talk about Jeff Wardlaw, when you oppose something, you should make a reasonable argument. Well, his argument was that we create a whole new division at DHS. I mean, it's just complete falsehood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no substantiation, didn't document it. DHS, which should document it if there was a DHS official, should have gave the committee something, outlined something that proved that. If you couldn't prove it, then you're starting to give information or arguments, not based on facts but on falsehood. You should be discredited. I mean, Jeff Wardlaw should have been run out of the legislature, really, for what he did. And, the second person that you start asking questions about is Michelle Gray. I mean, she was one of them in that committee that was making the argument against all this. Well, she runs this legislation for Jeremy and the orthodontist. I'm not saying anything's wrong, but you know what? Maybe she needs to answer some questions.
Well,
why did you run?
Anybody that opposed your bill that you ran multiple times for lawmakers to have to disclose the business they were doing with Medicaid entities, anyone that opposed that, it doesn't look good. I mean, it just doesn't look good. Considering what we know with Jeremy and what we know with anybody connected to preferred family health care that we know about, it certainly looks really, really bad. We're talking with Senator Bryan, former State Senator Bryan King. He's reacting to Jeremy Hutchinson pleading guilty a second time in the Western District of Missouri. Bryan, are you hearing anything about Jeremy Hutchinson cooperating with the government and maybe giving up other people involved in this?
No, I don't know any. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that conversation. I mean, who knows what's happening with that part of it? I mean, so no, I did not know anything about that, or wouldn't even want to begin to speculate on it.
Yeah.
Basically, my day revolves around chickens and cattle and Duke and Petey, my dogs, and the.
Are you glad to be out of that environment down there?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, you look at the Senate right now. There's nobody that's going to have any courage to speak up and get tough and demand answers. So there's none, zero. It's pathetic. I mean, Jim Hendricks should be and Dismaying and that bunch should be, grilled beyond any big grilled consistently, and nothing happened.
Yeah,
nothing happened, and so it's just a sad world down there, because what's happened, Paul, is it's like you read the newspaper on some bank robbery and somebody walks in and robs the bank and then walks out. Well, there's people, there's witnesses. I mean, if no one said anything, Jeremy is a criminal. That's what he is. Okay, he didn't make a mistake. You get down there, sometimes you can trust people you didn't know, find out later. You learn unfortunately down there, you learn, and people down there can be nice to you that really have something very deceitful or evil back behind it, and you kind of have to learn and go through the process to trust people. But Jeremy is a criminal. I mean, he consistently carried out these things that stole money off people.
Yeah, taxpayer money.
Stupid. And so you walk in a bank and somebody robs the bank, and no one says anything down there. In fact, they just act like nothing's going on, and they stand up and clap. And like I said, they reward somebody like Jeremy Gillum with $100-something-thousand-a-year jobs, which is a total waste of taxpayer money. At the same time, you're raising taxes on the regular Joe to pay for highways. I don't know. Like I said, they have
certainly frustrating. Yeah.
At DHS.
Let me ask you this
and
last
stole
question.
money, and no one was doing it.
Let me ask you this last question. You mentioned Senator Hendren, you mentioned Senator Dismang, and the bunch down there. You said they need to be grilled. They need to be asked all these questions by the media. Do you think?
Or call it.
Do you think that they're not being asked those questions? Because I mean, if they raise some of the questions that you just raised, I think eventually they would just stop talking to some of the mainstream media reporters. They just wouldn't talk to them at all. And so I think there's also kind of the fear with some of these guys that their access would be cut off.
I don't. You know what? Guess what? That's if that's your reasoning, you have another reason. Okay, that's your job to be asking questions and stuff. It's your job as colleagues to be questioning things that obviously went on that can't be explained, that need more detail and explanation. I mean, but what happens when you do that? You certainly have, like Linda Collins or me, you have all this dirty, dark money behind the scenes that's funding all these things with lies. You have, it's pretty clear now, Governor Hutchinson, why he opposed Linda and why he wanted me out so bad is because we were the only voices that would say anything and speak up. I mean, most of this corruption is still going on. There's still massive amounts of money being wasted, and the taxpayers are being looted out of the DHS appropriation bill, and there's not even a whimper of anything to stop there and say this shouldn't go on. It shouldn't be the feds that have to come in and do this. I mean, this should have been ended, a few years ago, and should have been stopped by the people down there, and not the feds.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Well, I'm certainly grateful. I know you're grateful for the feds. I mean, the wheels of justice turn slowly, but they finally kind of got around to coming full circle here. Like you said, Jeremy Hutchinson is a criminal, and we'll see if there's any more any more indictments or guilty pleas to come. And I really appreciate it, former Senator Bryan King. It's always great to have you on, sir.
Hey, thanks, Paul.
All righty, folks. You guys, we're going to take a break here.